The story begins in the city of Los Angeles on the night of December 23rd, when suddenly something or someone fell from the sky and crashed to the ground. Upon getting up, he found himself in a deserted alley, and at that very moment, large wings unfurled on his back. This was not a human being, but an angel descended from heaven, named Michael. He drew a knife and groaned in pain. Suddenly, his wings were severed and fell to the ground, and the glowing halo from his head vanished, merging into an iron bracelet. After that, he broke through the glass ceiling of a building and dropped inside. Then, within mere moments, killed a security guard and stole his uniform. Reaching the bathroom, he discovered a first aid kit, which he used to dress the wounds inflicted by his broken wings. Now dressed in the guard's clothes, he arrived at a room filled from floor to ceiling with guns and weapons of all kinds. He gathered several weapons, preparing to leave, but the exit was locked. Therefore, he used his strength to cause a massive explosion, creating a cross-shaped hole in the door. At that same moment, two police officers outside spotted him as he emerged. They drew their guns and advanced, intending to arrest him, but Michael cleverly grabbed one of the officers and snatched his gun, using him as a human shield. Suddenly, the other officer began to convulse. In a split second, he transformed into a terrifying creature. His teeth elongated into sharp fangs, and his eyes went jet black. Then, in a booming voice, he demanded of Michael, "What are you doing here against my orders?" Michael replied that he was no longer following anyone's orders, that he would do as he pleased. At this, the monstrous policeman scoffed. "Really? Then you will die along with that baby." And at once he fired a shot, but the bullet struck the other police officer. Michael, forced to act quickly to save himself, shot multiple rounds into the maddened policeman, killing him, then escaped in a police vehicle. In truth, Charlie was pregnant, but the baby was not Jeep's. Even so, Jeep was determined to take care of the child. The next day, he drove Charlie to his father Bob's diner. A short while later, a man named Kyle showed up at the diner, explaining that he had lost his way and that his phone wasn't working. Additionally, there was another family already stopped there because their car had broken down, and Jeep planned to fix it for them. When Bob went to check on Jeep outside, he saw that Jeep wasn't actually repairing the vehicle. Instead, he was fixing an old cradle for a baby. The sight of this provoked an argument between Bob and Jeep. Since Bob didn't understand why Jeep was intent on raising someone else's child, Jeep tried to deflect by mentioning the strange dreams he'd been having lately, dreams that made him feel compelled to protect Charlie. Bob, irritated by this, stormed back into the diner. Inside, he found the TV was getting no signal, and when he banged on it a few times, an emergency alert popped onto the screen. Meanwhile, outside, Jeep looked to the sky and noticed an ominous cluster of black clouds growing ever larger. Back in the diner, Bob attempted to get the radio and telephone working, but no signal came through. Just then, an elderly woman named Gladys entered the diner and placed her order, chatting casually with everyone there. Charlie brought Gladys her food, prompting Gladys to ask Charlie about her pregnancy. Suddenly, Gladys said something chilling, warning that Charlie's child would be burned to ash. Charlie was left speechless, and Gladys repeated the same horrifying statement. Alarmed by Gladys's bizarre words, Charlie stormed off. At that moment, Gladys's meal became covered in flies, which she proceeded to eat unflinchingly. She again declared that the baby would be consumed by fire. Sandra, a woman present in the diner, told her to stop talking like that. Instantly, Gladys's eyes turned jet black, and she spat vicious insults at Sandra. Sandra's husband, Howard, tried to defend his wife, but Gladys leapt on him with terrifying speed and bit him in the neck, tearing off a chunk of flesh. Screaming that everyone there would die, she overturned a table. Seeing this, the cook Percy hurled a frying pan from a distance, striking her squarely on the head, though it didn't even leave a scratch. All of a sudden, Gladys bounded onto the ceiling, scuttling around upside down, so Bob fired his gun at her. She dodged and weaved, then dropped back down in a surprise attack, knocking Bob over. Jeep snatched up a weapon and aimed it at Gladys, but she taunted him. "You'll never save her," leaving Jeep momentarily frozen. She lunged toward him, but Kyle, from behind, unleashed a hail of bullets that killed Gladys on the spot. Meanwhile, Howard's daughter Audrey had been cowering in a corner, where blood was dripping from the ceiling. Everyone saw that Howard was losing a dangerous amount of blood, so they quickly put him in Kyle's car, hoping to find a hospital. However, before they could get very far, they saw a terrifying funnel cloud of black insects heading straight for them. In no time, those insects swarmed into the car through every gap, filling the vehicle until all the passengers were overwhelmed with fear. Back at the diner, Jeep was feeling so shaken that he became sick. Bob tried to comfort him, but then they heard the car returning, so Bob ran outside. He glanced off into the distance and saw the swarm of insects heading their way. Before long, they hauled Gladys's corpse out of the diner, and that's when they noticed a police car approaching, though its driver was Michael. As soon as he stepped out, Bob pointed his gun at him, but Michael bared his teeth to show they were normal, not sharpened fangs, and Bob lowered his weapon. Through a tense exchange, Michael realized these people had no clue that the end of the world had already begun. Acting swiftly, he grabbed Bob's gun and aimed it back at him, but Percy intervened, trying to keep everyone calm. After some thought, Michael returned Bob's gun and explained that more insane people like Gladys would soon come to attack them. He pulled an arsenal of weapons from his patrol car, distributing them among the group, cautioning Charlie to avoid risking her life under any circumstances. All of them then hurried back into the diner, barricading the windows and doors with tables and chairs. They had no choice but to wait. When night fell, the power went out, so the men headed up to the roof to keep watch for enemies. Not long afterward, they spotted an ice cream truck approaching. Its driver stepped out, screaming at the top of his lungs. Suddenly, his mouth and limbs stretched to grotesque lengths, and he charged forward to attack with frightening speed. The group opened fire on him, and within seconds, he was dead. But the danger was far from over. Off in the distance, more vehicles, full of these monsters, were barreling toward them. Following Michael's command, they rained gunfire on those cars, causing collisions and massive explosions. Michael then used a rocket launcher to detonate another blast, toppling a large truck squarely in the middle of the road. More vehicles crashed into that overturned truck. The surviving drivers, all possessed creatures, emerged and advanced on the diner. Among them were children, which disturbed the group, but Michael told them these children were no longer human. The defenders kept shooting, piling up bodies. However, one monster managed to smash through a window and slip inside, vanishing into the darkness. Jeep couldn't see where to aim. The monster seized this chance to drag Howard away. The women rushed to help him, but another monster locked its sights on Charlie, picking her up. At the last second, Michael intervened, killing that creature and saving Charlie's life. Unfortunately, in the chaos, the enemy had taken Howard as a captive. Michael continued firing at the windows to block any further breaches, while Sandra, driven frantic by Howard's abduction, desperately searched for him. Michael tried to console her, explaining that Howard was gone. He also barked at Charlie to keep herself out of harm's way. Bob then confronted Michael, demanding to know exactly what was happening. Michael revealed that God had grown to hate humankind and wanted all people wiped out. Those deranged individuals attacking them had fallen under the control of God's angels, carrying out a purge of humanity. Michael explained that he too had once been an angel of God. Some found this difficult to believe, and Bob, who didn't even believe in God, was especially skeptical. Michael asserted that God had lost faith in humanity. Finally, he told them he had come specifically to protect Charlie's unborn child, who was now humanity's final hope. Regardless of who believed in God or not, their only option was to unite in defending Charlie's baby. At this point, Charlie was 8 months pregnant, but Michael said the child would be born on Christmas Day. Sometime later, Jeep pulled Michael aside to learn more about him. Michael explained that he had once been a general in God's army, but upon receiving the order to obliterate humankind, he abandoned the cause and came to Earth, insisting that while God's faith in humans had faltered, Michael's had not. He saw the world overrun with hatred and darkness, yet still believed wholeheartedly in people's inherent goodness, and he would do anything to protect them. At dawn, Bob and Michael took turns keeping watch on the roof. Michael remembered how it all started. When he had refused to obey God's command, the Archangel Gabriel tried to reason with him, explaining that humanity's downfall was the penalty for their own sins. But Michael insisted that angels should guide humans down the right path, not destroy them. He recalled seeing thousands of angels descending from heaven toward Earth. Gabriel told him that, whether Michael liked it or not, war had already begun. Inside the diner, Sandra awoke, feeling as though she had heard someone calling her. She looked out through the back door and realized it was Howard's voice. From a window, she saw Howard hanging upside down on a crucifix, his body covered in sores. He moaned in pain, pleading for her help. Panicking, Sandra began frantically moving tables and chairs to reach him. Kyle and Audrey tried to stop her, but she shoved them away and rushed outside to save her husband. His sores were on the verge of bursting. At the critical moment, Percy leapt between her and Howard, shielding her with his own body. Howard's boils exploded, spraying acid that rained down onto Percy. Screaming, Percy grabbed Sandra and dragged her back inside, then collapsed to the floor, dead. They discovered that the acid had eaten away the flesh and bones of Percy's back. When Bob learned what had happened, he broke down in tears, blaming himself for failing to keep watch properly. Meanwhile, the others lashed Sandra to a chair because she was beyond reason. Audrey attempted to calm her by offering her something to eat, but Sandra lashed out at Audrey, accusing her. "It's your fault we were traveling to another town in the first place." A short time later, the radio crackled to life, and they heard a report that pockets of survivors were banding together across the country to fight these monsters. The group considered joining up, but Michael refused, explaining that doing so would only make it easier for the monsters to reach Charlie. Night fell once again, and suddenly the power flicked on in the diner. A car approached from out front. Kyle and Audrey prepared to attack, but as they watched, it looked like the driver and his child might be normal humans, so they lowered their guns. It was a trap, orchestrated by the monsters, turning the electricity back on to lure everyone outside. At that instant, Kyle sprang down from the roof and unleashed a torrent of gunfire on the enemies. Bob tried to rush out to help, but Michael aimed a gun at him, insisting that if he opened that door, they would all be killed. Outside, Kyle took down several of the creatures, eventually reaching the child, only to realize that this little boy was also a monster. The child lunged at Kyle's neck with savage teeth, killing him in seconds. Audrey, enraged by the sight, couldn't hold back. She jumped from the roof and began firing on the remaining monsters. After a few moments, she ran out of ammo and hid inside a car, but they surrounded her. Inside the diner, Charlie was beside herself, screaming that Michael was doing nothing to save them. She threatened to go out and face the monsters alone, so Michael tried to restrain her. With no other options, he decided to step outside himself, wielding his weapons to fend off the horde. He fought skillfully, mowing down the enemies. Spotting the gas pump, he ignited the gasoline line, creating a wall of fire that forced the monsters to retreat. Calmly crossing the flames, he reached the vehicle where Audrey had taken refuge and carried her to safety just before an explosion rocked the area. They both dashed back into the diner. Moments later, Charlie went into the kitchen for some water and discovered that the monster child had slipped inside. It suddenly slashed at her with a knife, injuring her slightly, but she managed to raise a serving tray like a shield. When the blade struck the tray, it rebounded and sliced the monster's hand, severing its fingers. Charlie shoved the creature, causing it to fall. The lights went out. Using flashlights, the others followed the trail of blood and saw small handprints on the ceiling. Abruptly, the monster child dropped onto Bob's back, trying to kill him. Michael hurled the creature aside, and Jeep fired a bullet that finally brought it down. Just then, Charlie was overcome with intense labor pains. Michael and Audrey reassured her, helping deliver the baby, while the sky outside resonated with thunderous peals of church bells. On the roof, Jeep and Bob surveyed the landscape, and a sudden flash of lightning revealed a horrifying scene below. Thousands of monsters assembled at the foot of the diner. Inside, after tremendous effort, Charlie gave birth to a healthy boy. Even so, she initially refused to hold the child. She wanted Michael to take the baby away and care for it, but Michael told her, "This is your journey, and it's up to you to see it through." Audrey then took the baby over to Sandra, at which point Sandra seemed to melt with emotion, recalling her own maternal instincts. She even apologized to Audrey for her harshness, though she was quietly undoing her restraints. At that moment, the baby began to cry, and every monster outside heard it. The sound gave them piercing headaches. Suddenly, a louder bell tolled, and Michael warned everyone that Gabriel was arriving to finish the job. Finally, it dawned on the group that the true mission of the angels was to kill this child. But Michael remarked that this baby was never supposed to be born. Now that he was, the future and God's plan had changed. Hearing this, Charlie lifted her son to hold him, but Sandra broke free, snatching the child. She wanted to hand him over to the monsters, hoping to save her own life. In that instant, the church bells rang deafeningly, and the front door was blasted off its hinges. Michael was forced to shoot Sandra, killing her so the baby wouldn't fall to the floor. Jeep dove in at the last second and caught the child. At last, Gabriel appeared inside, spreading his enormous wings, and everyone recoiled in fear. In a flash, he attacked Jeep with his spiked mace, but Jeep dodged. Bob fired rounds at Gabriel, who spun gracefully with his wings, using them like a shield. During the melee, Gabriel drove a blade into Bob's stomach, then hurled him into the kitchen. Jeep tried to help, but Michael blocked him, urging him to escape with the child. Michael wanted Jeep to find the prophet and read his instructions, but Jeep did not grasp Michael's meaning. Despite the confusion, Audrey, Charlie, and Jeep took the baby and slipped out the back door, where an army of monsters stood with their heads bowed, strangely allowing them to pass. The trio jumped into a vehicle and sped off. Inside the diner, Michael told Gabriel he had no fear for his own life anymore, because the child was safe. Enraged, Gabriel launched a deadly assault, while Michael retaliated with a hail of bullets. Gabriel whirled around, determined to strike with his mace and wings. Abruptly, the mace clashed with Michael's gun, and he slammed Michael against a wall. Transforming his mace into an axe, Gabriel advanced. Michael, in a surge of anger, smashed a TV over Gabriel's head. They fought on until Gabriel, finding an opening, struck with his wing, slicing open Michael's abdomen. Michael still wouldn't quit. He leapt onto Gabriel, trying to choke him. So Gabriel snatched him up, soared through the ceiling, then slammed him down. With a final blow of the mace, Gabriel killed Michael. Cradling his brother's body, Gabriel wept, and Michael's remains dissolved into radiant light. Simultaneously, Jeep noticed lines mysteriously appearing on his arm. Realizing it must be Michael's instructions, Gabriel heard a faint sound in the kitchen and discovered Bob still alive. Bob flicked on a lighter near the oven, causing a massive explosion. The blast consumed Gabriel and all the monsters waiting outside. Gabriel survived, however, emerging moments later near Jeep's vehicle. He attacked them again, prompting Jeep to shoot him. Gabriel slipped, tumbling onto the back of the car, but the bullets had no effect. He climbed inside and struck Audrey, knocking her unconscious. Seizing the baby from Charlie, Gabriel prepared to kill Jeep, but Audrey regained consciousness and yelled at Jeep to slam on the brakes. As soon as he did, Audrey and Jeep were flung through the windshield, crashing onto the pavement, while their vehicle flipped down into a ravine. Somehow, the two of them, along with the baby, scrambled up the slope, but Gabriel reappeared and attacked again, knocking Jeep out. He ordered Charlie to hand over the child, but she refused at any cost. Jeep came to and lunged at Gabriel, trying to shove him off the cliff. They both tumbled violently to the ground. Drawing a knife, Gabriel was about to finish off Jeep when a dazzling light halted him. It was Michael, reborn with his wings restored, once again a full angel. Michael told Gabriel that while Gabriel always gave God exactly what he asked for, Michael gave God what he actually needed. Furious, Gabriel tried one final strike, but now Michael's powers had returned, allowing him to defeat Gabriel with a single blow. Michael spared Gabriel's life, and the disgraced archangel retreated. Michael departed in pursuit, but paused long enough to declare that Jeep was now the true guardian of the child. In the end, Jeep, Charlie, and the baby set off in search of other survivors, hoping to raise the baby, humanity's last hope, to adulthood. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.